Gallant Old Engine by the Reverend W. Awdry. Dear friends, on the second page of Four Little Engines, Rheneas was taken away to be mended. He was away for a long time, but he has now come home. All the little engines are together at last. They are delighted. Rheneas is their hero. He had saved the railway. There is a real engine like Rheneas. His name is Dolgoch, and his home is at Towyn in Wales. Some years ago, he saved the Tallylin Railway. We are very proud of our gallant old engine. The author. Special Funnel. Peter Sam's funnel had never been quite the same since the accident with the slate trucks. Now, as he puffed up and down the line, the winter wind tugged at it, trying to puff it away.
"My funnel feels wobbly," he complained. "I wish the thin controller would hurry up with my new one. He says it will be something special."
"You and your special funnel," said the other engines and laughed. They were all fond of Peter Sam, but he talked so much about his special funnel that it had become quite a joke. The winter weather worried Mr. Hugh. Wind broke branches from trees while rain turned hillside streams into torrents, which threatened to wash the line away. Mr. Hugh and the men patrolled the line every day with Rusty. They removed branches and cleared culverts so that the water could flow away. But one morning, they found trouble. A fresh torrent had broken out, and Mr. Hugh had to stop all trains. "There's been a washout near the tunnel," he said. "The track bed is swept away." The men worked hard and repaired the damage in a week. While they worked, the weather changed. It became frosty and very cold. They finished just in time for market day, and Peter Sam took the train very carefully over the mended piece of line. The tunnel was short but curved, so they could not see through it. Suddenly, the driver shouted, "There's something hanging from the roof!" He braked. There was a clanging crash. When Peter Sam and his coaches stopped in the open air, he no longer had his funnel. The guard found the funnel and a thick icicle. "That's what hit you, Peter Sam," he said. They started again, but the passengers grumbled at the smoke, so when the firemen found an old drain pipe, they stopped and wired it on. The engines laughed and laughed when Peter Sam came home. Sir Handel made up a rhyme.
"Peter Sam said again and again, his new funnel would put ours to shame. He went into the tunnel and lost his old funnel. Now his famous new funnel's a drain."
They teased Peter Sam dreadfully, but his new funnel arrived quite soon.
"Oh dear," he said. "Someone squashed it."
The thin controller laughed.
"It's a Giesel, the most up-to-date funnel there is. Listen, when you puff, you draw air through your fire to make it burn brightly. With your old funnel, puffing is hard work. It uses strength you need for pulling trains. Your new funnel has special pipes to make the air come easily. Puffing will be easier, so you will have more strength for your work."
"Yes, sir,"
said Peter Sam doubtfully. At first, Peter Sam's special funnel was a great joke. Sir Handel and Duncan asked him why he had sat on it, and then hooted with laughter. But when Peter Sam started work, it was a very different story. Even Sir Handel was impressed.
"I can't understand it," he said. "Peter Sam never seems to work hard. He just says, ch-ch-ch-ch, and simply strolls away with any train he's given. He makes it look so easy."
They don't laugh at Peter Sam's funnel now. They wish they had one like it. Steamroller. Sir Handel kept slipping between the rails, so they gave him new wheels with broad tires. The other engines teased him. "Look at his steamroller wheels," they laughed.
"You shut up," Sir Handel snorted. "You're jealous. My wheels are special like Peter Sam's funnel. Now I'll go faster than any of you."
"You'll never!" The engines were surprised. Sir Handel's trains were usually late. Skarloey winked. "With your grand new wheels, Sir Handel," he said gravely, "you're just the engine to tackle George."
"Who's George?" Sir Handel asked.
While Peter Sam was in the shed waiting for his new wheels, workmen had come to widen the road, which ran for a mile or two beside the railway. They pulled down the wall, and now nothing protected the line. George was their steamroller. He chuffered to and fro, making rude remarks when the engines passed.
"Railways are no good," he would say. "Pull 'em up, turn 'em into roads."
Skarloey had often heard that talk before, and he warned the others to take no notice, but he hoped that when the two boastful engines met, he and the others would have some fun.
"Don't worry any more," said Sir Handel importantly when they told him about George. "Leave him to me. I'll soon send him packing."
Next morning, George was standing near the halt by the level crossing.
"Huh," he said. "You're Sir Handel, I suppose?"
"And you, I suppose, are George. Yes, I've heard of you."
"And I've heard of you. You swank around with steamroller wheels, pretending you're as good as me."
"Actually," said Sir Handel sweetly, "I'm better. Goodbye."
He puffed away. George chuffered, fuming. One afternoon, Sir Handel had to bring a special load after the last train had gone. When he reached the road, he saw George trundling home. Peep, peep, peep! George took no notice. He trundled along close to the track. There was barely room to pass. Peep, peep, peep! Sir Handel slowed and crept cautiously alongside.
"Get out of my way, you great clumsy road hog!" he hissed.
"I don't move for imitation steamrollers," retorted George with spirit.
They lumbered along side by side, exchanging insults. No one could ever explain what happened next. George's driver said he signaled for Sir Handel to stop. Sir Handel's driver says he signaled to George. There was a crash! The brake van tilted sideways and the guard scrambled out to find George's front roller nuzzling his footboard. The two drivers were hotly arguing whose fault it was. A policeman strolled up in time to stop the argument turning to fisticuffs, and when Sir Handel's firemen came back with Rusty and Mr. Hugh, they all set to work clearing up the mess. Neither engine had been going fast enough to cause much damage, so Sir Handel was able to bring his train on when George had backed himself away. Next day, the workmen put a fence between road and railway and then went away, taking George with them. This was because they had finished their work, but Sir Handel thought he had made George go away. He was more conceited than ever and talked everlastingly about steamrollers.
"Oh dear," whispered Skarloey one evening. "He's worse than ever. I'm sorry my plan was no good."
"Never mind," said Rusty. "We'll think of something else."
But they had no need to do that, for some boys came and asked Mr. Hugh if they could look at the engines. Almost at once, one called out,
"Look, here's Sir Handel. He raced a steamroller last week. The roller nearly beat him too. It was most exciting."
Sir Handel never mentioned steamrollers now. Passengers and polish. Nancy is a guard's daughter. She was working on Skarloey with some polish and a rag. "Wake up, lazy bones," she said severely. "Your brass is filthy. Aren't you ashamed?"
"No," said Skarloey sleepily. "You're just an old fusspot. Go away."
She tickled his nose. "Rheneas comes home tomorrow. Don't you want to look nice?"
Skarloey woke suddenly. "What? Tomorrow?"
"Yes, Daddy told me. I'm going now."
"Nancy, stop! Do I really look nice? Please polish me again. There's a good kind girl."
"Now who's an old fusspot?" laughed Nancy. She gave him another rub, then climbed down.
"Aren't you gonna polish me?"
asked Duncan. "Sorry, not today. I'm helping the refreshment lady this afternoon. We must get the ices and things ready for the passengers on Skarloey's 2 o'clock train." "Never mind, Duncan. I'll give you a good polish tomorrow." But Duncan did mind.
"It isn't fair," he complained. "Peter Sam gets a special funnel. Sir Handel gets special wheels. Passengers get ices. And I'm never even polished."
This, of course, wasn't true, but Duncan liked having a grievance. He began to sulk. That afternoon, a message came from the station by the waterfall. "One of Skarloey's trains has come off the rails. Please send some workmen to put it right." Duncan was in steam, so he had to go.
"All this extra work," he grumbled. "It wears an engine out."
"Rubbish," said his driver. "Come on." The derailed coach was in the middle of his train, so Skarloey had gone on to the top station with the front coaches. Duncan left the workmen and brought the passengers in the rear coaches home. He sulked all the way. He arrived back just in time for his 4 o'clock train. "I get no rest! I get no rest!" he complained. He was sulky and short of steam, so his driver waited a few minutes in the hope of racing more, but Duncan wouldn't try. "We can't keep the passengers waiting any longer," his driver said at last.
"You always think about the passengers," muttered Duncan crossly, "and never about me. I'm never even polished. I'm overworked, and I won't stand it."
He grumbled away, brooding over his wrongs. Duncan made heavy weather of the journey, but at last they reached the viaduct. This is long, high, and narrow. No one can walk on it when a train is there. "Come on, Duncan," said his driver. "One more effort, and you'll have a rest and drink in the station."
"Keep your old station," said Duncan rudely. "I'm staying here."
He did, too. He stopped his train right on the viaduct, and nothing his driver or fireman could do would make him move another yard. Skarloey came from the top station to haul Duncan and his train to the platform. The passengers were very cross. They burst out of the train and told the drivers, the firemen, and the guard what a bad railway it was. Skarloey had to pull the train to the top station, too. Duncan wouldn't even try. The thin controller was waiting at the shed for Duncan that evening. He spoke to him severely, but Duncan still stayed sulky. He muttered to himself,
"No polish, no passengers,"
in an obstinate sort of voice. Gallant Old Engine.
"I'm ashamed of you, Duncan," said Skarloey. "You should think of your passengers. Passengers are just nuisances. They're always complaining." Skarloey was shocked. "That's no way to talk," he said. "Passengers are our coal and water. No passengers means no trains. No trains means no railway. Then we'd be on the scrap heap, my engine, and don't you forget it. Thank goodness Rheneas is coming home. Perhaps he'll teach you some sense before it's too late." "What has Rheneas to do with it?" "Rheneas saved our railway," said Skarloey.
Please tell us about it,
begged Peter Sam.
"The year before you came," said the old engine, "things were very bad. Mr. Hugh was driver and fireman, while the thin controller was guard. He did everything else too, and helped Mr. Hugh mend us in the shed. We expect 2 fresh engines next year, they told us, but we must keep the engines going now. If we don't, our railway will close."
How awful,
said Peter Sam in sympathy.
"I tried hard, but I couldn't do much, but Rheneas understood. 'It's my turn now,' he said. 'You've done more than your fair share of hard work.' He was often short of steam, but he always tried to struggle to a station and then rest there. That," said Skarloey earnestly, "is most important with passengers."
"Pshaw!" exclaimed Duncan.
"Passengers," Skarloey continued, "don't mind stopping at stations. They can get out and walk about. That's what stations are for. But they get very cross if we stop at wrong places like viaducts. Then they say we're a bad railway and never come back." "I remember Rheneas stopping in a wrong place once," said Skarloey. "He couldn't help it, but he made up for it afterwards. That afternoon he had damp rails and a full train. There were passengers even in Beatrice, the guard's van. His wheels slipped dreadfully on the steep bit after the first station, but they gripped at last. 'The worst's over,' he thought. 'Now we're away.' 'Come along,' he sang to the coaches. 'Come on. Oh, I've got cramp,' he groaned. He stopped, unable to move, on the loneliest part of the line. The thin controller and Mr. Hugh examined him carefully. The passengers watched and waited. Rheneas eyed them anxiously. They looked cross. At last the thin controller stood up. 'Your valve gear on one side had jammed,' he said. We've unfastened the rods and tied them up. Now, Reneas, he went on, we need to reach the next station. Can you pull us there on one cylinder? I'll try, sir, but the next station isn't the right station. Will the passengers be cross? Don't worry, smiled the Thin Controller. They know we can't reach the top station today. The Thin Controller sanded the rails. Passengers from Beatrice pushed behind. Mr. Hugh gently eased out the regulator. The train jerked and began to move. I'll do it! I'll do it! Everyone cheered, but Reneas heard nothing. The Thin Controller's relying on me. If I fail, the railway will close. It mustn't! It mustn't! I'll get there or bust! Everything blurred. He was too tired to make another yard, but he did. And another, and another, and another. Till I've got there at last, he sighed with relief. It's very proud of you, I am indeed, said Mr. Hugh. All Reneas remembered about the journey down was having to go on going on. At the big station, the passengers thanked him. We expected a long walk, they said, but you brought us home. We'll come again and bring our friends. You're a gallant old engine, said the Thin Controller. When you're rested, we'll mend you ready for tomorrow. Was Reneas always ready for tomorrow? Always, smiled Skarloey. Whatever happened, Reneas always pulled his trains. It was Duncan who broke the silence. Thank you for telling us about Reneas, he said. I was wrong. Passengers are important after all. All the little engines were at the wharf on the day that Reneas came home. Some of the Fat Controller's engines were there too. Edward pushed Reneas's truck to the siding, and Skarloey pulled him neatly to his own rails. This was the signal for a chorus of whistles from engines large and small. You never heard such a noise in all your life. The owner, Reneas, and other important people made speeches, the band played, and everyone was very happy. But Reneas was happiest of all in his own place that night, next to his friend Skarloey. This helps the little engine to feel, he said, that at last he has really come home.